So, welcome everyone to the Advanced Work Packaging Community of Practice webinar series. We've got a great session for you today. Steve, could you move us to the next slide, please? So, we've set up a series now, and we've been telling you that we were going to use a different approach to programming. And the different approach is that we've reached out to owners and contractors and EPCs and asked them to help us identify the challenge areas they're experiencing. And we've come up with the following program. You can see that in October, we have 2 sessions on the work phase planning side, creating executable work packages, and also on the front end planning side, AWP and engineering. We also are trying to broaden things by talking about applying AWP to commercial projects, and also a very hot topic right now, scaffolding and access. And we have members of the CII committee that are looking into that that'll be presenting. We also have a session on modularization, and finally, we'll be rounding out the year with a session on data requirements updates, because there's a lot of exciting work going on there. Steve, can I get you to move us to the next slide, please? We've been spending quite a bit of time developing an AWP and Lean Summit. This is a CII event. It's coming up on the 28th and the 29th. We have 20 experts, a number from the Lean and the AWP communities in our thought leader group, and then a really good contingent of AWP and Lean subject matter experts. There's going to be a lot of information that we'll be providing there about not only what each of the 2 approaches are, but more importantly, how you can use them together to get even better results. And so we think this is going to be a great event, and we really encourage you to register for it. Next slide, Steve. The Houston conference is coming up on the 26th and 27th, and we have probably 80 to 90 speakers from the owner communities, from the contracting communities, from the technology communities. So there's lots of really great content. We strongly recommend that you take a look at that. In 2019, we had 400 people attend. This time, we believe with visual or virtual ability to attend, that the numbers will be even higher. So we've got a website that you can go to and get more information. So if you have any questions, get back to us, but we think this is a great event as well. Next one, Steve. One of the big focuses right now is taking advanced work packaging and applying it to other sectors. So in November, we have a session on AWP and the power and utilities sector. Next slide, Steve. And then in December, we're going to be running one on applying AWP to the mining industry. And then finally, next slide, Steve. We're having one on infrastructure projects. So AWP is well established, but in some of these other sectors, it's just not being utilized to the same extent. And so that's what the focus of each of these summits are. 2 days, lots of content. Now, this is important. When you are asking your questions, we're going to be using a tool called Slido. So you can do this one of 2 ways. You can take your smartphone and you can take a picture of that QR code, or you can just go to slido.com at AWP Lean, and you can ask your questions. And one of the key things about Slido is when the questions come in, you can actually vote on which questions you're most interested in getting more information on. So again, another great tool. We'd really want to get you engaged in this, get you asking questions. So at this point, I'll hand it over to Fernando, who's going to be moderating this panel, and he will introduce his panelists.
Okay, get my screen shared here, and hopefully you can see my screen. And,
yep, we can.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you, Lloyd. Appreciate that. Let me get my slides set to go. So yes, exploring advanced work packaging and lean construction planning and execution approaches is the purpose of this webinar. Just to give everybody a little bit of the agenda where we're heading. Lloyd just ran through a few announcements. We're going to talk about this AP and lean webinar and the thought behind it, and then go through a couple of questions where our panelists are going to address them, give little 5-minute bursts of each, and then a moderated question, which I will ask after their responses. So question 1, question 2, and then a little bit of a Q&A wrap up at the end. So Lloyd's going to help us through that. Okay, so let me introduce the panelists. Lloyd, of course, was our host. Thank you so much. My name is Fernando España with ConstructX. We've been involved with advanced work packaging, and my background comes out of the lean world as well. So a lot of experience in both. Robin Mikkelsen is with AWP University. Many call him the godfather of, in many ways, of advanced work packaging. Been involved.
Sorry, Fernando, there was an unintentional mute there. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you and have you rewind about 10 seconds. If you could unmute yourself as well.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering what went on there. So yes, again, my name is Fernando España with ConstructX, involved with advanced work packaging and background in lean. In the early days, going back to 1990 something. And we have Robin Mikkelsen here with advanced work packaging. Also, many consider him one of the godfathers of workplace planning and advanced work packaging, being involved considerably with the CII group. And interestingly enough, Robin's early days in advanced work packaging actually was around the last planner system. So he's got some experience in both. And then a good friend, Nigel Harper. We go back quite a ways, back to some of the most significant lean implementations, probably still renowned around the world, going back to P5 Heathrow Airport, and some of the work that he did with some of the precasters in the early days of lean, and of course on the airport themselves, and many other jobs. So Nigel is an expert in lean and DFMA and quite a few things that will be interesting to cover today. So I'm going to keep going. Hello there. Just to let you know, this is all part of the CII AWP plus Lean initiative and the joint working group. And we have a lot of members of companies that are inside CII and outside of CII that have joined this joint working group. And as you can see, we have a bunch of owners, a lot of EPCs and contractors, and universities, and of course, the Construction Institute and CII are members, and some technology groups as well. So quite covered in many aspects of lean and AWP. The core team members, which help guide it, as you can see, starts with Sophia, myself, Dr. O'Brien out of the University of Texas, Lloyd here on the east side, Jamie, who's been a leader in advanced work packaging, and Eric Cravella, digital construction work. We're trying to but address these kind of things, understanding and bridging this gap that seemed to have existed between AWP and lean, improve the whole project delivery process, increasing opportunities for collaborative contracting, and explore general approaches, whether it's pre-construction, material management, site execution, and standardization and productization, are key things that lean and AWP can have conversations around and improve the overall project delivery programs. In today's session, what we're going to do in the summit is much broader than what we can do here in an hour. So during the summit, we're going to address all these different topics between AWP and lean, through all the project life cycle. So this is not meant to be a workflow, but meant to be topics within each of these different stages that a project or portions of projects would follow. So we understand there's a blending. We're going to focus on two general questions, at one in pre-construction and one in execution today, that Nigel and Robin will both address. So without further ado, I think we'll start with question number one. And so this, we're going to have Robin answer this one first, and then Nigel answer it next. Give him 5 minutes. But question one, during pre-construction, what lean or AWP approach is most effective in aligning stakeholders to a defined scope of work, which we're talking about stakeholders, designers, engineering, construction, subcontractors, vendors, and why? Why is it most effective? So I'm going to hand this over to Robin.
All right, thank you very much, Fernando. Let me figure out how to share my screen here quick.
I have to unshare and then
there you go.
There you go.
Oops. Sorry. Let me know if you're seeing my screen now.
Yes.
All right, excellent. So great question, Fernando. So what early on in the project lifecycle, if you will, is a good methodology for integrating multiple disciplines and identifying scope, is how I interpret the question. In AWP, probably the largest, the pivotal, the jump off point, often after project identification itself, is going into IAP sessions, interactive planning sessions for the development of the path of construction. Path of construction in AWP is a pivotal point for identifying the overall basis of how a project is going to be executed and what the bits and pieces are going to be in what basic order. We then, of course, break that down into what we call the CWPs, which are part of the POC, but then into IWPs, into those packages. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the actual development of that interactive planning session to facilitate the path of construction, if you will. So I've got a couple quick flow charts here. We're not going to go through them in full detail here today, but we're going to cover the concepts that we would bring forward in AWP. In these planning sessions, the main idea is really to bring all of the different trades together. Often in our planning environments and our planning systems, we tend to forget about the integration of the different trades, the integration of the different groups, the integration of the different crews, and them all having their say for such things as, earlier, Lloyd mentioned that scaffolding is very hot right now. Well, part of that integration, part of the things that are covered during the IAP sessions is the identification of large and multi-trade use scaffolds, which is a great aspect for saving money on a project itself, beyond just identifying the scope and breaking down and plugging those items into a AWP-friendly WBS structure, if you will. Identifying those support trade basis and the integration between the different trades and different personnel on the project is really what the path of construction facilitated by interactive planning is really all about. Being able to bring that together and being able to identify where we're going to go with this project and getting all those personnel in the same room. Too often we go off, we put a lot of faith into schedulers and planners. They go into a dark room somewhere and come out like they're the Wizard of Oz with this plan that's going to, cure world hunger. Unfortunately, it doesn't often facilitate across the different masses of the different groups and the different trades. This aspect of early scope definition is really pivotal in the AWP process. Interactive planning for the path of construction is very pivotal. Some of the main objectives coming from it is, as I've mentioned, bringing forward integration. Some of the typical outputs, AWP risks, issues, decision logs, screen captures of the planning wall is often a key. We've all been into planning sessions, either using software technology or the old school sticky notes on a wall. However you're going to do it, that's all part of those planning sessions, and bringing it forward to identify that scope is integral. That path of construction, the development, the bringing of all the trades together is really where things start for AWP after project definition, if you will. We utilize a lot of different things, such as the IAP cadence, which is well rooted, I believe, in Lean as well. And the ability to be able to come together, go away, do the tasks that are required, bring them back together in this accordion model to be able to identify quickly the items that are required by each of the different groups to facilitate the whole that is the plan that we're bringing together from the path of construction. So I won't go into detail about the direct path of construction, but there is 4 basic gates within AWP that we facilitate within the path of construction. Being the scope definition, which is basically the definition initially of the CWAs and the basis of the project. Then we get into project definition, where we're starting to break down into CWPs, getting discipline specific now. Then we start to get into such things as our IWP release plans, definition, tying it to engineering, making sure that those packages are tied in detail to it. Then, of course, execution, where based on how the craft wants to execute, they're pulling those plans, those IWPs directly into the field for execution and control, and facilitating the plan that's been feverishly labored over by the multiple different trades and groups. So I believe that's the basis of the 5 minutes, Fernando, and that's kind of where we would jump off in AWP for early scope definition.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Robin. You can pass the presentation back to me.
Yes, sir.
I'll do this. I know 5 minutes is very, very little time to cover a broad topic, but at least it gives us a flavor of what we can and cannot consider. Okay, so next we'll get Nigel to answer the same question, and I've got Nigel's slides here. So let's go ahead and jump onto this. And I believe you want to use the case study.
Yeah, so good afternoon from London, first of all. You'll be glad to know we're having summer today. After a grey August, we finally got the sun out, which is great. Yeah, so as Fernando said, Nigel, more a practitioner than expert in Lean, really. And so my 2 question answers are going to be really case study based, because that's what we do, is we implement Lean and AWP onto live projects and see a real difference. Okay, let's go. Let's count to 3, Fernando. So to me, this is really quite eerie listening to Robin's stuff, because it's a lot of commonality. Capturing clear goals and clear desired outcomes for the project is important. So this one was for a client, Anglian Water. They're building a new Pathfinder wastewater treatment works, and big carbon agenda. They wanted to reduce their embedded and operational carbon. They wanted to reduce their time on site by 50% and significantly reduce their costs. Around about 15% is what the affordability ratio was. But they also had some softer things they wanted to achieve. So being really, really clear about what you're setting out to do at the start of that project is absolutely key. Okay, next one, please. And then once we understood what the outcomes that the client wanted and understood in detail what they were trying to do, we were then able to respond with the team to put together our own strategies for how we're going to deliver that. I'm going to talk through each one of these quickly, so I won't go through them now. I've got a slide on each one just to spend sort of 10-15 seconds on. Thanks, Fernando. So key prerequisite for us in the Lean environment is to have what we call the tier 2s, so the subcontractors and the trades actually at the table. They're the guys who know how to build stuff. They're the guys who are hands-on. Getting them at the table, having the right commercial model with them so they're incentivized to contribute and incentivized to drive cost down rather than cost up is critical, and actually giving them involvement and a voice in terms of owning and living the project is really, really key. So the picture you see there is a bunch of trades sat in a room actually starting to work on the scheme 6 months before it hit site. So it's really, really important. Next one, please. Also, what we then did, we did a lot of work with the trades in terms of integration. So in the UK, we kind of use this term integrator a lot, where we facilitate teams coming together and working in a different way. So as interactive planning, collaborative planning, call it what you will, you see the big long sheet of paper and post-it notes. We worked for 3 days in a hotel workshop on this particular project with a 3D model up on the screen, and then working out how we were going to go build that in the most optimum and best way. And that was great for getting, again, everybody on the same page and getting the right outcome. Next one, please. DFMA, so we do a lot of design for manufacture and assembly, going 50% quicker in terms of site hours. The only way you're going to do that is if you pre-assemble. So we do a huge amount of thinking about that DFMA early doors. There's lots of specialist companies over here who do that. And then we actually use the technology to really facilitate that happening in terms of 3D modeling and prototype management. Next one, please, Fernando. And then we also build, we call it a rehearsal. So we rehearse the build over and over and over again in terms of using the process steps to actually knit the two things together, product and process, we call it, to actually give us a fully working plant before we even hit site. So we can understand the problems, and when we rehearse and rehearse and rehearse again. And the important thing is the tier twos are doing this too. So the guys who are actually building the works are actually fully integrated in making this happen. Next one, please. Then key lean principle is run first round studies. So Glenn Ballard, I worked with Glenn a long time ago, and he was absolutely adamant that you need to go and get these first round studies done and actually put into practice what you're planning on doing, see the issues and the faults so you can actually learn and improve. So absolutely critical. Next one, please. Then implementing what we call production management or last planner or numerous names for it. So actually do this in design with the design teams. It's a bit of a culture shock for the designers, being held to account and being rigorously on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis checked in on in terms of their plan, do, check, act cycle. But it works. It creates that environment where you're incentivized and encouraged to do well and get things over the line, and actually enables you to keep that design on track. Next one, please. And then lastly, we used the model and the whole process we mapped out to engage the stakeholders, pretty much like Robin was talking about before. So actually get the business, in this instance, the water business, to understand what we were building, what they wanted in terms of maintenance and access requirements, and actually brought that alive for them and had massively positive feedback in how we engage with the business in that respect. So I think that's my 5 minutes up. I think that's the last slide, Fernando, isn't it?
That is. Thank you.
And so that's what we take from it.
Okay, so I've got a question for you both. Now that from what you've heard from the other group, what should lean or AWP practitioners consider applying in their next lean or AWP project? So Robin, got a couple minutes of a response for that?
Sure, absolutely. I think a couple things, one thing that a lot of projects tend to fall apart on or forget about is putting structure around a gated process for the development of their project scope. And what I mean by that is, I brought up the slide earlier, and I'll see if I can bring up no, never mind. I won't bring it up for this. Oh, there we go. Okay, never mind. Let me do it again. So the last slide that I covered earlier, which was the path of construction integration and the milestones themselves. Often in different projects, what happens is we get caught up in facilitating different meetings, facilitating different programs or types of exercises, and forget to actually bring in the gates and the checks and balances that we need to understand before we move to the next steps with certain aspects. So just in a general basis of a lot of forgotten items, if you will, or things that should be implemented on projects, making sure that you follow those gated processes before you say that we've moved to the next level, I think is the one thing that I would focus on. People do a lot of things, do a lot of meetings, do a lot of planning and scoping, but do they actually ever check that they are ready to move to the next levels or facilitate the types of sessions? As Nigel was mentioning earlier, I think a lot of the different methodologies he was mentioning is very similar to what I was saying. The whole point of the symbiosis between the two, AWP and Lean, is very key. And regardless of the methodology you're hanging your hat on, being able to clear those gates and your checks and balances, I think, is one thing that projects often forget, and I would say needs more rigor.
So maybe getting a little bit more of the collaboration of groups together and trades together to kind of help clear those gates or come up with ideas how to best clear those gates. So, okay, thank you. So let's jump to Nigel. A couple minutes.
Yeah. So to me, I think the structure of AWP, certainly in my leading implementations, would be a massive benefit. And I think to bring that across from AWP into Lean, that more structure and that more rigorous approach, I think would have huge benefits. we are structured in what we do, but I think it's on the next level in terms of AWP. I think in terms of how the whole piece is put together. But I'd reiterate what Robin said. I think the commonality, between the two approaches is there's a lot of commonality, a huge amount of commonality, and I think we should build on that and just add the best bits from each to build a really workable solution.
Yeah, I think that would be that'd be great. I see that what Robin was showing earlier, the packaging strategies and developing bobs and bits of things in terms of very discrete physical type elements. And
I think AWP lends itself to DFMA as well, because you need that structural rigorous approach, because if you make it off-site and bolting it together on-site, it needs to be right when it lands, and it needs to be in that structured manner. So I think there's massive commonality there.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's move on to question 2. During execution, a foreman takes us throughout to perform a series of defined and ideally constraint-free work scopes. How is this achieved, and what happens when work cannot be completed as planned? So 5 minutes with Nigel. I think I've got your slides here too. I'll let you go.
Good luck and fun.
Yeah. So again, I'm just going to use examples. I'm currently sat on Battersea Power Station at the moment. So the left-hand picture I took this morning from outside my office, that's what it looks like. It's Apple's new headquarters in the UK, and it's 230 apartments and a 500,000 square feet of retail. And that's what it looked like back in the 70s for those of you like Pink Floyd. That was the Pink Floyd Animals album cover. Okay, next slide, please, Fernando. So again, if you just click one more, I think, to that second bit come up. Yeah, there you go. So again, my first experience of Last Planners was with Glenn and Todd back in the day. And to me, it is all about engaging with the frontline people and engaging with the workers and helping make their lives easier and better. It's a stressful enough existence out there trying to build things. So the idea of helping them have a much more unconstrained way of going to work so they could just focus on their work tasks is really critical and really key. And to me, planning is all about what you can and should do. And what we call production management or last planner is really all about what you will do and what you did do, so you can learn to get better. I'm not going to go through the whole where planning stops and production management last planner starts. It's pretty self-evident from the left there. But what we do with the teams, if you hit the next slide, please, Fernando, in construction, is we really spend a lot of time in the planning world understanding what their mini milestones is. That top slide there is 1.7 billion pounds worth of work split down into mini milestones over the next 3 months. And what we do is to understand from the plan where we're heading and what we're trying to do. And you'll see some of the pins in the wall are red and some of them are green. So that's ones that are on track and ones that are behind. It's a really simple tool and technique we use just to really understand and make transparent what the mini milestones are. What we then do is use those mini milestones and take them down into workshops with the crews. So that's the foreman you see in the meeting there, and designer as well from Pure Happold. And we run sessions. We run, I don't know, 15 sessions a week probably now, if not more, with the teams for an hour or so. We get them to come in, and every week we plan 2 or 3 weeks ahead in terms of what we're looking to do in terms of discrete tasks, hopefully linking up to those mini milestones. And then we take that down to a daily basis where we meet with the black hats, we call them, which are the supervisors out on site. 15-minute stand-up meeting where we plan at 4 o'clock today what we're going to do tomorrow, and then at 4 o'clock tomorrow we come back and say, did we get it done or didn't we get it done? And we capture the reasons why things don't get done, because that's really valuable and rich learning for us. So it gives us that traceability. Next, please, Fernando. So we have lots of data coming out, and the data is only as good as how you use it. So I deliberately showed you a team that wasn't going particularly well back in the day. So I picked something from fairly early back in the project. And this stuff happens, but you don't know where you are unless you can measure where you are. So for me, having that data and having, feeding that data back to the team so they can say, okay, we're only achieving 1 out of 2 things we plan to do on a daily basis. That's the imperative then to improve. And we've used that, again, I'm not going to go through them all. We've used that to do lots of different things in terms of performance improvement. So how we can actually improve things for the trades out on site, how we can get better data of how things are going, and also look at where we need to improve using data, not perception. So in construction, we're great at thinking we know what the answer is and thinking we know what the problem is. Actually, the data can tell you where the problem is, and that's much more factual and a much clearer way of doing things. And again, in full transparency, being honest, you know, we've used the information to help hold trades to account where things aren't going well. We've used it as an encouragement to them to say, come on, data shows you're not doing very well here, you need to improve. Can we do that, please? Next, please, Fernando. Is that the last one? Yeah, okay. And again, more opportunities to improve. And how can we make productivity a much more real thing out there that people are talking about all the time, as opposed to safety and all the other things that go on. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. We got Robin. You've got 5 minutes to answer the same question. Do you have some?
All right, excellent. Okay, let me relinquish this here again. There we go. Okay, you see my screen?
Yep.
All right, so in follow-on, it's almost like we planned this, Nigel. We're going to talk about the same kind of things here, the benefit, the basis. But the truth is, when I just talked about path of construction planning and that type of thing as the typical scoping tools through IAP sessions for AWP through to the project. When we start talking about field execution and involving the craft, that's a massive aspect of AWP. AWP's first phasing, if you will, or first basis, or that path of construction development is really all about parsing down the project into chunks that can be easily consumed by the field. Once we get them down to that basis and that CWP type size, which is, you know, that construction work package that's in around the 5,000–10,000 hours, depending on the size of the package, then we start to get heavily involved with the craft to start to get that pull from them to identify what they want, when they want it, and kind of how they want it. So what I'll do is I'll go to the next slide that's a little bit more detailed on that in the life cycle of an IWP. So this is ripped right from the pages of RT272 from CII. I helped put this chart together many years ago, and the basis of it is, as Nigel was saying, it starts with that superintendent's meeting or that group meeting where we sit down with the craft and say, okay, here's that CWP package that we developed. Here's the schedule. This is when the schedule says we kind of need to do it. Now we got this big chunk. What are we going to do with it? So to identify what we're going to do with that big chunk, we start with those meetings, we get the craft's input, start to break it down and scope the IWPs, the next level of package, where it's very similar to the last planner methodology. And, you know, for the first several years of my career, as Fernando mentioned, I didn't know what I was doing AWP last planner. I was just doing planning methodologies moving forward as a previous student of last planner. And with a few nuances that kind of became work-phase planning. But when we look at it, bringing the craft in, bringing them in to identify what they want in those IWPs, and then in work-phase planning, you've got a work-phase planner that goes away and does all the heavy lifting, the magic behind the curtains to come forward and say, okay, is this your plan? And bringing it forward to the craft so that when they pull that plan out to the field, they know what they're expecting. And when they get it out there, it may be a week or two's worth of work, they can then start to break it down into the production planning environment, that daily plan type activity. But when we start to scope the IWPs and they go through the life cycle generation, being able to bring that forward, being able to identify with input from the craft, as Nigel stated earlier, is key. They are the experts. They are the ones that have their boots on every day. They're out there in the field. They understand the restrictions, the constraints. Without constraints and constraint management, all you have is groupings of work. You don't have executable work. And that's the real big key, is identifying what the work is in the installation work packages, bringing them forward to the craft after they've been fully constraint cleared, and going through that matrices that's very well prescribed within AWP and work-phase planning. I know another flow chart. I love flow charts. I tend to think in flow charts as the way I like to try to communicate. So here I am bringing up another one. But when it comes through the aspect of control, a lot of people think, okay, the IWP's done. They've scheduled it. That's the end of it. That's where it starts. being able to control it through the life cycle and be able to record what the craft actually did do. They ask for what they're going to do, then they do it, then we record what they actually did and record any changes or deviations. That's all part of that installation work package life cycle that's extremely important at that craft level for integration with them. So with that, there's a couple things that are key in that as far as bringing those people together. I know I'm harping on that. I harped on it in the path of construction. But it's not an isolated planner in a single environment. It is a collaborative environment where these gates need to be met. Those superintendent meetings or general planning meetings need to be held to capture those scopes and bring them forward through an integration across the different craft. These craft meetings are multiple trade. They're not single disciplinary, which is key. Get all the disciplines together in a single room, start identifying scopes and bringing them forward so that we have an understanding of who's going to be what, where, when, and doing what is kind of the big key in that. Of course, there's much more detailed drawings below this, but for the purposes and my 5 minutes being up on this aspect, that's kind of the main essence of how do we deal with getting the craft's input, not making them do a lot of heavy lifting and bringing it forward. So thanks, Fernando.
Thank you, Robin. So go ahead and hand that back to me.
There you go. Should be good.
There it is. Okay, so hey, after that, great comments. I know that integration of trades is really important here. So a little bit of a follow-up question. You talked about it, but the integration of these trades, the disciplines are critical if we are to optimize performance, right? That's kind of what we're after overall. What key integration practices do you recommend to alleviate conflict and achieve better results? So if you could kind of highlight that a little bit, Nigel, can you offer anything?
Yeah. So to me, it's a couple of key things, or three key things probably. One is to get the trades on board as early as possible and create the right environment to allow them to perform. So you have to address the contractual thing. You have to get them incentivized to contribute to doing things differently, and rather driving up cost, driving down cost. And so that's a key mindset that you need to be able to create. And then at physical trade level with the guys themselves, with the superintendents, as you guys call them, and the foreman, and the black hats, as we call them over here, it's about getting them involved in the planning. They are the last planners. They are the last people to do any planning before you put people to work. So they need to be really understanding what they're doing and be as constraint-free as possible. And it's about supporting them and giving them tools to help make that planning easier and making them 70, 80% reliable, not 50% reliable. It really brings home the bacon, as we say over here. So yeah, that whole piece about getting them in is really interesting. But we don't need to drag the trade supervisors to the last planner meetings. They're in there waiting because they get benefit out of it, because they can see what the other trades are doing, and they can trade between the trades, if that makes sense, in terms of, you know, space and safety and integration and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, it's just creating an environment to allow them to go about their planning in a better way. So they'd be the key things for me.
Great. Thank you. Robin.
All right, so with that aspect, I think there's a couple key personnel that we really need to integrate that are responsible, if you will, for a lot of those aspects. Am I sharing my screen now? You've seen the pillars of support. So a couple things that are key in the AWP methodologies: certain individuals that are responsible for being the master of ceremonies, if you will, for a lot of these integrations between the multiple different trades, whether they're the work phase planning coordinators or the AWP facilitators that are brought into an organization. Really, their main issue is to make sure that people have the materials that they need to do this planning, the last planner aspect, if you will, from the lean point of view, or the integrated planning aspects in AWP, to make sure that everybody is brought forward to identify these IWP requirements. And then, of course, we get into the short interval production controls done at the field level, where that IWP hits the field. Now what, right? You got a week's worth of work, 2 weeks worth of work in that package. Do we just start at point A and work through to point B? No. You know, as Nigel mentioned about who the last planner is, to use that term or steal it for a moment, the basis of the the craft doing the activities within that scope of work in a manner that suits them based on the constraint analysis that's been both done for them as well at the field level that they're doing, and bringing forward these types of workflows to ensure that we have not just multiple trades conversing together, but within a single package themselves, they've actually got a clear work plan on a daily, hourly basis as to what's going to be executed. Because without clear plans like that and without that production control at the craft level, integration is hearsay, meaning that they're like, well, I'm going to be over in that side of the plant tomorrow. How's that work for you? Rather than I'm going to be over in that side of the plant tomorrow. I'm going to be executing against exchanger such and such. We're doing the inlet piping. Those types of details to get that craft integration and start fighting that craft congestion, also enabling multiple work fronts to be activated at the same time is key, as well as the ensuring that the constraint-free activities are actually getting accomplished in the time frame that was identified. So the biggest thing is bringing that short interval production control at the craft level to enable those superintendent, or not the superintendents, the general foreman at that level and the foreman to actually do the final planning, that last planner type aspect, armed with the IWPs as the scope. So thanks for now.
All right, well, thank you for that. And I think, let's see, I believe we are now at the Q&A part of this. So I think we hand it back to Lloyd.
Great. So Steve's put together a couple of questions just so we can get to know the audience a bit better. So Steve, could you throw up that first polling question? Okay, so we'll give you a little bit of time to vote. And we really do want to hear from you, so please take the time to speak to that question. Okay, and at this point, we've only got a small fraction of the people on the call that are voting. So if you could speak out, we'd really appreciate it.
All right. You asked for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like being on a reality TV show, Fernando.
Yeah, I know. Wow.
Yeah, we want to hear from you. So we're still only looking at a small portion of the people on the line, but I think you can see we've got a little bit more AWP knowledge. Then we've got AWP and lean. Very few have no knowledge of either, but basically the ones that only know about lean is very, very small. So guys, that gives you a better understanding of the audience. Now, Steve, can I get you to go to the second question that I posed? And this is just your opinion. Do you think that AWP and lean are very complementary, somewhat complementary, not complementary, or they don't work together at all? You know, the votes are coming in a little quicker this time.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a race here. I think it's obvious where we're going with it, though.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think it's important for the panel to get a sense of where you're coming from. What we want to do now is have you actually ask questions. Now, one of the things that I will say just before I hand it back to the get your questions and hand them back to the panel is to support the COP membership. You'll notice that Steve's put a QR code in, And if you do want to attend the summit, we're offering a 20% discount for anyone in the COP that attends. So there's a QR code there for that.
Just to clarify, sorry, Lloyd, just so there's no confusion, the QR code on screen is actually just to access Slido, but there is a direct link and a discount code posted in the chat that can be used for the discount. Just to separate.
Yeah, I was referring to the code that you put in the chat.
Perfect.
CII 20 is the code. Okay, so now what we'd like you to do is to ask your questions, and great, we've got some questions already. Just to remind you, you can ask questions, but you can also vote on the questions that have been asked, because the more people that vote on a particular question, the higher it goes up in the scoring. So let's start with John Clarkin's question. Can you match activities, e.g. your IA overview, up with CII front-end planning phases, FEP 1, 2, or 3, or IPA phases FEL 1, 2, or 3? So I'm going to start off with Robin and then flip it over to Nigel and Fernando to see who'd like to add to that. So Robin, your thoughts?
Well, the first thing I would say is the different phases and the different points of looking at how to parse and break up a project, they don't necessarily all line up tip to tail. But when charted onto a single place, can very easily be shown to match across them, if you will. I've actually got a diagram I can bring up here quickly where we've done exactly that. I'll find it here shortly. But they're all about breaking down the project and these different phases, if you will, whether it's stages from the CII aspect, the front-end planning stages, or it's the actual 0 through 5 stages, there are 0 through 4 stages that are mentioned in the 272 literature for AWP. They all can be mapped to each other quite easily. Maybe not a full start to finish, but definitely can be mapped across. So.
Okay, Nigel. And Nigel or Fernando, who would like to jump in next on that one?
I suppose yeah, go on, Fernando, you go.
Go ahead, Nigel. I was wanted to ask if you understood what FEP 1, 2, 3 or FEL 1, 2, 3 are.
I kind of assume they're the gated process steps. Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
early
planning.
Yeah.
Concept.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So most of our clients over here, most of the infrastructure clients in the UK and beyond, have their own gated processes, and they're all very similar. So I think there's a lot of commonality with a typical gated process. They're all subtly different, but they're all kind of much the same structure. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to line things up for sure.
And Fernando, anything you'd like to add?
I think we could move on to some of the questions.
Sure. So let's go to the next question. Do you see Lean as an expansion on the methodology of how we implement AWP? And I think we should start with Nigel for that one.
I just see the two approaches as hopefully, unrehearsed as it was today. Hopefully you can see from what Robin and I presented, there's lots of similarities and there's lots of overlap. So I don't see it as an expansion at all. I think that they're very complementary approaches. They have some core building blocks. They're just subtly different. I think there's the reason I've become more and more attracted to AWP over the last couple of 3 years working with Fernando is I think it's just going to add more to the richness of the Lean implementations we do. It's helping provide some better tools to help us basically make clients' projects go faster and cost less. That's what we're all here to do.
Great. And Robin?
I agree completely with that. I mean, the basis of, if you look at the literature and the basis from either section, if you find a little bit of a weakness or a hole in one, it's often heavily detailed in the other. Where you could look at the two, they're going in the same direction, they have the same basic types of philosophies. And when you look at certain aspects of how to run certain sessions, they may be highly detailed in one or highly detailed in the other. If you put the two together, we often laugh, you put the two together in a bag and shake it up, you're going to end up with a pretty darn good process across the basis. And you know, I'm not afraid to admit it myself, especially as an educator in AWP. I steal from Lean on a regular basis. There's a lot of really good detail of why reinvent the wheel. You know, a lot of these things have been detailed by one group or the other, and the two together are simply much better moving forward for a project.
I think as well, if I might come back on that, Lloyd, I think what we also see here, and one of the reasons I'm attracted to AWP is that with DFMA, Design for Manufacture and Assembly, AWP does bring that structure to really, you know, make that sing in my mind. So I think that this huge.
I'll add to this one. You know, I agree that there's a lot of commonality, but there are techniques. And this is Lean. How to implement AWP. There are a lot of techniques that are used in the Lean world that are not really leveraged as much as they should be in the AWP world. And concepts like target value design. You know, these different types of big rooms. And until you can talk about being in an interactive planning session. But the methodologies, the culture that's established, the discussions that go back and forth, the reevaluations of things, you know, do offer a lot of opportunity in the ADP side. And I would even say that from what Robin showed is that on the short interval planning, you know, that's because Robin knows what works really well in the ADP world. But I would imagine that when you look at short interval planning and really insert the last planner system into that, you know, one, it is very effective, and that's what Robin was showing. But how it's adopted and the degree of which it's adopted today in the ADP side, I would think has a lot of room to grow. So I think that lean thinking perception is still could drive lots more benefit into the ADP side.
So let's go to the next question. AWP seems a great way to introduce blockchain and artificial intelligence in construction. Are there current research focus areas in CII along similar lines?
That's a cool question.
That would be probably a Robin first question, or Fernando.
Yeah, I think there is. I think Robin is probably more in tune to what is going on, but I know that there is some work CI is doing in terms of AI and blockchain on a few of these people that I'm aware of, and one being Hala Nasruddin out of the University of Kentucky, focusing on technology topics. And we just recently introduced technology as a capability as part of our AWP capability assessment. So it's becoming more and more important about these technologies, including AI and data exchange, data management, data integration, and a capability of an organization to support this more advanced implementation. So, Robin, do you have anything else to add to that?
You're on mute, Robin.
Yeah.
You're still on mute.
Oh, you may have to release him. Maybe he accidentally went on mute. That's Stephen.
There you go.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not sure why that keeps happening, Robin.
I guess Stephen didn't want me talking. He gagged me.
We only got so many minutes, Robin.
Banging on the button and it keeps telling me Stephen hates you. No. Just kidding, Steve. Thanks, bud. I think there's definitely a lot moving forward around blockchain and AI. I'm actually part of a group that was just kicked off recently in CII, a research team. RT391 is the code for it. It's about AI in construction and a lot of things that we can look at in AWP, and how can we start to automate some of the things that we may take for granted that requires a planner at some position or some point with algorithms and as well as machine learning and AI. So there's great things to come. I mean, it's definitely part of the ecosystem moving forward for AWP. The truth is, we're not trying to put anybody out of work, but if you ever try to find highly qualified workplace planners, they're difficult to find. So trying to empower that type of mindset into AI is definitely a big movement forward for the AWP communities.
So the next question, and this may sound like a cop-out, but They're asking about how do you incorporate pre-construction and execution. Um, we're spending 1 hour on a couple of topics today. At the summit, we're spending 4 hours going through exactly that question. So rather than shortchanging that, I'm going to tell you that that will be covered at the summit. Let's go to, I think we've got time for the last two questions. What are the main lean tools that can help with AWP methodology? So I'm thinking Nigel would be the first one to answer that.
Yeah, so sorry, someone just came into the room. Apologies. Yeah, I think for me, it's difficult because when listening to Robin speak, there's so much crossover between the tools that you know and the approaches that I've been using the last 10 or 15 years, and he was describing. I think potentially the digital prototyping stuff, we use that a lot now in terms of visualizing the product and then figuring out the process steps for how you go build it. I'm sure you do a lot of that in the AWP world as well, but certainly to me that's a massive one. And I think as well, you do the interactive planning stuff. Yeah, I just see so much crossover. It's really kind of difficult to really pick one in particular. So it's a cop-out answer, but I apologize.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there, Nigel. There's a couple things that I would pull immediately, that only from the basis of things that I covet within Lean, and that would be certain things like running sessions, outputs of sessions, tools for controlling and how you work in those types of environments. I think Lean does very, very well, and I think it's a good add to AWP methodologies.
Yeah,
Okay, so
let me add a couple things to that, because I believe there are these tools. I mentioned some of them before. Target value design, target value delivery is our concepts. Choosing by advantages, is an early approach of how do we make decisions. What is really the best alternative to use? And I've used that before, and you're surprised sometimes at the outcome of what you thought was the way to go really wasn't. A3 thinking, right? Hey, we have a problem statement. How are we going to bring groups together to actually resolve an issue? With the last planner system, I think there's some nuances in the last planner system that we could probably explore a little deeper. Early on, in some of these bigger lean projects, cluster groups start forming, right? And they're based on systems and things that look at trade-offs between different groups to optimize a project. And then, of course, even the big rooms, there are nuances, I believe, on how they're used and how they're leveraged. So there's a few things like that we've explored, and I think there's like 20 different techniques that I've identified to use in AWP. So big opportunities. There's so much similarity. It's strange, but the fact is, what can AWP supply to Lean support, and vice versa? Again, it's exciting, and it's worth a conversation, and it will be a conversation for the next few years, for sure.
So last question we have is, what are the most reliable platforms today that help with AWP management, including resource management? Robin, did you want to comment on that?
Reliable platforms, are we asking about the software in the industry and those types of things? Because typically we wouldn't go commercial in that type of basis, but I mean, there's lots of management systems out there to help with AWP, whether it's Hexagon, it's Bentley themselves, it's Autodesk or Aviva. Each of your majors, if you're looking for a good AWP platform, I guarantee, go to your engineering group, look at what their vendor of choice is. I guarantee that vendor of choice has a system that will help with AWP. Doesn't mean that you have to go with the engineering system in an AWP management system. You can have cross-pollination. Most AWP systems will work with all design platforms, but it's a good place to get started based on what your internal tool sets look like to move forward, and then identify if maybe that particular vendor doesn't have the tools you're looking for, then expand your search. I'm not going to plug anyone individually with it, but there's a lot of great tools from the majors out there. Give them a look.
Yeah, I'll add to that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
Let me add to this.
Fernando.
I think the platforms today, we're mostly talking about software in terms of point solutions, and I believe everybody having different software they use, the different organizations. I think what we're going to start seeing is the integration of an integration platform that starts emerging, that can take information and data from different sources and present it in ways that's highly usable and consumable by the organizations, the projects, because each platform has pluses and the minuses, but no one, in my mind, has the platform that serves the entire AWP management or resource management question. It's good stuff out there, but it's an integrated platform and there are integration tools out there, and I work with several of them. But the fact is, I don't think that one platform really exists at this point.
I completely agree with you, Fernando. And the hint that I would give for most individuals going on a journey to identify automation platforms for themselves, pay attention to the microservices, pay attention to data processing at the lowest levels. No system, as Fernando is mentioning, is fully interoperable with every other one. So data needs to be converted, massaged, dealt with, processed. Those microservices is where the money is often spent and the time is spent preparing data. Ask those questions when looking at a platform for integrating data into them, and that's where you're going to save yourself a lot of money. A lot of people want to focus on click here to add to work package. They all do that today. It's the back end, the processing of the data from multiple different systems. That's the key. That's where you want to spend your questions and your time when you're assessing.
And final word to you, Nigel. When it comes to lean, same question.
Yeah, it's probably in particular there's a lot of now web-based last planner type tools out there. The majority are very good. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff, and in terms of digital prototyping, there's a lot of excellent tools out there. So there's a lot of good stuff.
So I'd like to thank our panelists for the excellent job that they've done. Got a number of comments through the chat about just how much they enjoyed the session today. Want to thank all of the attendees for coming. And don't forget, the summit is coming up soon. And if you want to register for it, there is a discount code in the chat window that you can pull out, and it'll get you a 20% reduction. So thanks to everybody that attended. Thanks to everyone that presented, and we'll see you at the next session. Bye now.
All right.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you all.
All right. Have a great day.
Bye.